Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me, my colleague Clayton Jones.
Good evening.
And tonight, our guest is Terry McWilliams, who was the founder of the Students for Sensible Drug Policy chapter at San Jacinto Junior College. Glad to have you with us, Terry.
Glad to be here.
Okay. You, Clayton, seem to be upset by a new tactic the IRS
Yes. I was reading today that the IRS is starting to go into California to the dispensaries and the grow-ops that work for the dispensaries.
Yeah.
And they are disallowing a lot of their deductions and calling them in to be audited. They're just, it's just their new way of going after people.
You know, to go back a little bit in time, do you recall what Al Capone was sent to prison for?
Mm-hmm.
Income tax evasion.
Yes.
They weren't able to convict him of bootlegging, so they brought Internal Revenue in. It's been one of their tactics, and since the Attorney General has really limited the ability of the DEA to go after grow operations, the feds have been trying to find new ways to work at it. Now, part of the problem is that the California law is in many ways a lousy law because it was aimed strictly at the consumers of medical marijuana.
Right.
Yet, somehow, you've got to get that medical marijuana to the consumers.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has to grow it, someone has to harvest and process it, someone has to distribute it, and someone has to put it in the hands of the user. And the original California law, the 1996 proposition, didn't go into any of that at all.
No, it didn't.
California tried to straighten it out with their Senate Bill 420 several years back. And it was a very poorly written statute. It allowed for the formation of cooperatives and nonprofit organizations to provide marijuana to the patients. The problem is they didn't do a very good job of defining what these organizations are. And across California, we see all sorts of differences. In Oakland, for instance, they've decided that you can still be a nonprofit cooperative even if you're making a reasonable small profit out of it.
Mm-hmm.
In other places where there are more strict-nosed local DAs, if any money of any kind changes hand in the operations, they consider it to be an illegal for-profit business. That their view of cooperative means that the patients themselves have to get together, do all of the growing, then divide the crop up among themselves. If we then look at what the federal government has done, they have been reasonably, and I say reasonably here, good about not directly harassing users. They went through a spell, and this seems to have pretty much stopped since Holder came in. They went through a spell of really vindictive harassment raids where they would go into dispensaries, confiscate all of the product, any money they found, any worthwhile expensive equipment like computers, trash the place, and then never file criminal charges against anyone.
Oh, that's still going on.
Because they knew that with California juries, there's no way to get that to a large extent has stopped. A few of the larger, more blatantly commercial dispensaries, I think, are still getting raided, both by the feds and by the state police. And I'm being possibly a little bit unfair when I say the more blatantly commercial ones, but the problem is you've got operations in California that really are. We've got a phone call already, and I want to remind people that this is your show. If you have a question or comment, please call us using the number on the screen. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, how you gentlemen doing?
Pretty good.
I have a question that I'd like to ask, and maybe you gentlemen can help me. Listen, I'm a truck driver, and I had a problem that recently happened at my house. I called up the speed restriction, and they told me that it was okay to have my 18-wheeler, just the tractor by itself, parked on my
Okay, I'm afraid that you're getting a little bit about our area of expertise, and it's the kind of thing that you probably need to talk to your own lawyer on. We can't give individual legal advice here, but thank you for
calling. That's not legal advice I'm asking. I was asking if you guys have any opinion towards whether or not the officer have a right to tow a vehicle off my property out.
Well, once again, I don't know the circumstances. I haven't looked at the law involved in that area.
Okay.
So, thank you for calling. Anyway, as the DEA has been forced to back off in California and Colorado, and they have backed off quite a bit, they've been looking for new ways to get in. And the Internal Revenue has given them one way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that under federal tax law, nonprofit organizations are exempt from taxation, but they have to keep records to show that they truly are nonprofit. Now, a nonprofit can, of course, if you're a nonprofit and you have an office, you can certainly pay a salary to someone to come in and clean your floors every night. You can probably have a secretary who's a paid employee. If you're a nonprofit church, for instance, you can hire an employee preacher and pay him a salary. The problem is to show these things as expenses to Internal Revenue, you have to open your books to show them what you're doing. And if you show them that these are employees helping you distribute marijuana to patients, then you're admitting that you've committed a federal crime. The problem under the California law is that DEA, a lot of the California district attorneys, and Internal Revenue are reading the California statute very restrictively and insisting that the only legitimate operations under the California statutes are cooperatives, mm-hmm. where no money changes hands, where all of the patients and caretakers contribute their time and labor and in return get their share of the marijuana. They're saying that a traditional nonprofit, which has salaried employees and runs like a business, except that it doesn't make any money, any excess that it has is returned to charitable uses. They're saying that a nonprofit cannot be considered legitimate because it's not a cooperative. And part of the problem, as I say, the California law is poorly written.
You know, it comes back to the same thing. American public has spoken. I mean,
Yeah.
every survey that they ever do, it comes out on the positive side in favor of cannabis. I don't understand why these politicians that we have don't hear what the American people are saying.
Because they're not listening to the American public. They're listening to the large moneyed interests that pay their campaign expenses and help build their own private piles. Now, let's think about something here, and I'm not accusing anything because I don't know the facts. But if we take Rick Perry, for instance, the governor of our state, his only employment for over 25 years has been as a paid employee of the state of Texas. The state of Texas is not known for paying outrageously large salaries to anyone. Yet somehow Rick Perry's managed to become a millionaire while all that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you like to know how that happened? I know I would.
I definitely would.
Oh, yeah.
How did some of these people that have been in Congress 20 or 30 or 40 years, drawing reasonable but not really excessive salaries, manage to become as rich as some of them are?
Now, a congressman, I think they make, what, $168,000?
Okay.
And there's a 6% increase every single year that they don't even have to vote
Okay,
on.
but $160,000, it's a good salary. You
Sure
can
it
live
is.
comfortably on it.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of salary that makes you into a millionaire.
True.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe at the end of your life, yes.
there's a whole lot of money that shows up in the lives of congressmen that cannot be attributable to their salaries. I don't want to go any further than that. You're the people that vote for them. It's up to you to ask the embarrassing questions of your own representatives.
Now, I still say, if they're in office, next election, vote them out.
Well,
I mean, they're not working for us anymore.
I've been toying with some ideas, and I hate to get philosophical here, but more and more on the national level, and to a large extent on the state level, I hear politicians treating government like it was a football game. And the only thing that matters is whether their team scores more points than the other team every 2 years. Somewhere along the line, they forgot the whole business of governing. That what they're supposed to be doing is doing things that make life better for the citizens. They're not up there simply to win next year's election. Let's see who's on the phone. Hello, you're on the air.
I'm sorry?
Hello, you're on the air. Do you have?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question about.
Could you turn your
you were talking about the politicians.
Could you turn your TV down, please?
Yeah, you were talking about the politicians not being interested in the issue of governing, rather doing it more like a football team. As long as one side gets more victories than the other. Well, with what's going on right now with the marijuana debate in California, when they spoke and said that a lot of the marijuana growers themselves supported this bill not being passed because they would bring in the agricultural pot growers and the big business, the big agro growers, and it would run them out of business. Now, could that have happened? And would the agro growers would have been able to do that? And would have been able to come in and just take it over like that?
Okay.
I don't think so, because federal law has it that you have 99 mature plants, or 99 plants, and then you go federal. And our federal laws would all have to change as far as numbers.
The other side of that is big farmers like ConAgra and Anderson Clayton are all interstate, and they're very careful about federal law. The question, though, and the thing that bothers a lot of the California growers is what for some time I've been calling the broccoli issue. That marijuana grown legally on a legitimate farm is just like any other vegetable. It's an annual plant. There are no mysteries to it. It shouldn't cost any more than broccoli or asparagus. Yet instead it goes for $300 to $400 an ounce. It should be $1 an ounce or less. And I think what a lot of the California growers were afraid of was that if the state actually legalized the growing of it, that their prices would drop by 90% or more, and they wouldn't be able to make a living.
Well, prices have fallen in California tremendously.
About 25% or so.
Last I read that they were getting about $1,000 a pound for outdoor grown.
And it used to be about $3,000 to $4,000.
Right.
Yeah. We need to take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk to Terry some.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! This is Sativa Claus. And from the Houston chapter of the National Organization of the Reform of Marijuana Laws, I wish you a high and happy Christmas and a high and happy New Year.
Researchers at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas reported that mice on Ramonabont developed potentially cancerous polyps at a far higher rate than controls, confirming that endocannabinoids are not only mood regulators, but tumor regulators as well.
We're at war. At war against the plant. A war that can never be won. Marijuana can kill you. If you smoke 15 tons in 15 minutes, the equivalent of eating 10 raw potatoes.
We're back with Drugs, Crime, and Politics. Our guest tonight is Terry McWilliams. And as I understand it, Terry, you were a student at San Jacinto Junior College. And while you were there, you helped organize a chapter of Students for Sensible Drug Policy.
Yes, sir.
Tell us what SSDP is.
Students for Sensible Drug Policy is a grassroots organization basically for the fight for more sensible drug laws in our eyes. I started the chapter because I was a little infuriated with prohibition, and have family and friends who are victims of the drug war in many different ways. So I decided to take action. I organized the SSDP chapter at San Jac, and we did some fundraising and basically just spread the word. I enjoyed it as it lasted. It's dormant now, but I think we spread the word to a lot of people, so we did our part.
Well, now, San Jack's a pretty big place, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I know there are several campuses, and do you have any idea what the total enrollment is?
I'm not sure. I'd say a few thousand. There's 3 campuses, North, Central, and South. I mainly worked at Central. We had quite a few supporters, I'd say in the hundreds.
Well, that's not bad. Of course, one of the problems with a school like San Jac is that it's primarily a commuter school.
Yeah.
As opposed to a university like University of Houston, where large numbers of students live on campus and are there round the clock full time. So
true. Yeah, we had some problems with that because of the high turnover rate of students. They could only, support us as they were going there, and then they'd transfer up to a university and such.
Right.
So
yeah.
it didn't last as long as I'd like, but I think we did a lot of good there, and being one of the first progressive organizations at the campus, I think we led the way for, more organizations to do the same in the future.
Yeah. Well, as I understand it, SSDP is a nationwide organization.
Yes, absolutely. There's, I think, thousands of chapters all over the U.S., colleges, high schools, universities, lots of them.
Yeah. And actually, I've known a couple of SSDP members that they've graduated from college and gone on and have managed to find full-time jobs working for particularly marijuana legalization. Do you intend to stay active?
Most definitely. I'm very passionate about the cause, and the harm that prohibition brings is just, it's beyond me. I don't know how we let it get this bad, so of course I'd love to stay active in the fight. Anything I can do.
Well, you're a man after my own heart, because you're talking here about the harm that prohibition does, which I think is where the emphasis needs to be, instead of our worrying about the individual drugs so much.
Definitely.
You're
right.
Trying to say something?
No, I was going to say, have you run into a lot of people that have had problems getting financing for school because of
actually,
drug charges?
Actually, they had just, I think, made it to where a few people, or a few more people, could get financial aid with drug convictions, but it's not fully repealed to where all of them can. I can't remember the specifics on the law, but
the original federal law said that anyone who ever had any kind of drug conviction at any time would be barred from all federal financial aid to education. This was what originally led to the founding of SSDP. They were active enough that they managed to get Congress to change that law a little bit, so that now only if you're convicted of a drug crime
while receiving financial
aid will you be barred. And I think it's only for a limited time even then. So that's
still a big step forward.
It was a very big step forward, and it shows what organization and determination can do. And
absolutely.
I'm really glad to see that after accomplishing a large part of what they were organized to do, the students stayed active and have kept working and expanding their efforts. So I think it happens to be a great organization.
Absolutely. And it involves students, who are, learning. They're going to be our future eventually. They're our future leaders, our future business owners and such. So it's a great organization.
Okay. Well, I noticed also this week that the governor of New Jersey caved a little bit, and it looks like that New Jersey's actually going to be able to get their medical marijuana
have 6
operation up and running after he stalled for a full year.
Well, they're going to have 6 regional dispensaries or grow-ops.
And no larger than New Jersey is. That's probably enough. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, I have a comment and I'd like to ask you a question.
Okay.
My personal opinion, I think the war on drugs, I think what should be banned is cigarettes and tobacco. And my question is, what do you think about them wanting to put the graphic pictures on the cigarette warnings now?
Okay. I might start out by saying that during the 1920s, about a dozen states actually passed laws prohibiting cigarettes. I mean, after all, gentlemen smoked pipes or cigars, and guess what? They weren't able to make their bans against cigarettes work. So, you know, I don't think prohibition in any form works. But right now, in the period of time about 30 years from when we first started putting labels of any kind on cigarettes, started working around with tax structures and education, limiting advertising, cigarette use has dropped down from a majority of the adults in the country to, I believe the figures that just came out today, it's now down to about 18%. So this is the one time when we have pretty well successfully attacked a drug problem without sending anyone to jail.
Well, we send people to jail that sell it to children.
Well, now that's a different issue. And we also send people to jail that sell alcohol to children.
Yep.
There was something in the paper today about an 18-year-old, I believe, somewhere around Dallas, that was suing the federal government because the federal law would not let someone sell him a handgun. So, yeah, how we manage to isolate children from risks. We have age limits on driver's license. In many states, we now have graduated driver's licenses. So that's a different issue from actually trying to prohibit the substance.
Just a part of regulation.
Yeah. And as for the graphic pictures on cigarette packages, gosh, I don't know. If you look at the way 8 and 9 and 10-year-olds love to go to movies, the scarier and the gorier the better. If you've ever been to a Halloween haunted house where there's bowls full of eyeballs or guts, you're closer to a kid than I am. What do you think the effect of gory, gruesome pictures of cancer-ridden lungs on the packages will be?
I mean, with all the publicity surrounding tobacco and stuff, they know it's bad and what it does and what it causes. I think it's just gonna be like a cool factor to them, the younger ones coming up and stuff. It's not really gonna do too much to deter them. They already know what it's gonna do. If they're gonna do it, it's gonna be their personal choice to do it or not. I mean, their parents could have been smokers. They could have been raised around it, you know. The nicotine could have already gotten to them. They're just bound to be smokers. It's all up to what happens.
My folks used to be smokers. They would smoke in the car with the windows up in the middle of the winter up in Maine and Connecticut.
Mine too.
And I think that's the most distasteful thing anybody can do. I've always disliked it just from being in the car.
But once again, I think the times really have changed. In the 1950s, almost 60% of adult men were tobacco smokers. By the time the 50s were over half the women were. So, you know, we've really made a lot of progress. And it was only in I think, the middle to late 1970s, that even the possibility that secondhand smoke would be a problem even came to anyone's attention. And I think this is something else that people don't realize, is that usually change takes time. And speaking of time, it's time for us to take another break.
It's time to play Name That Drug by its side effects. Nausea, heartburn, development of bleeding ulcers, vomiting, swelling of the brain, extensive liver damage, difficulty with mental functioning, Reyes syndrome, and death. Time's up. The answer, aspirin, another FDA-approved product.
I'm Marcia Rosenbaum, and I direct the San Francisco office of the Drug Policy Alliance. Now, I want to ask you young people a question. Have your parents had the drug talk with you? If they have, I hope it's been productive. If not, I would suggest that you open up the drug talk with them. It's a very, very important talk. And we at the Drug Policy Alliance, through the Safety First Project, have materials that can help you open up the drug talk with your parents. And particularly a brand new booklet called Safety First, a reality-based approach to teens and drugs. Now, in this booklet, your parents will get lots of advice from a reality-oriented parent, me, about how to talk to you about drugs. Basically, there's 3 key issues. One is communication. You want to keep this drug talk going for as long as you can, probably for as long as you have a relationship with your parents. It never ends. There's always issues. So communication. Next is honesty. We've got to be honest with each other. You need to be honest with your parents, and they need to be honest with you. The scare tactics about drug use haven't worked. They're counterproductive, and they don't help us to really educate each other. And then finally, and maybe most important, is you want to have a solid relationship that is based on values that hold safety as ultimately the most important element of your drug talk. Safety is really the bottom line when it comes to how we should handle the issue of alcohol and other drugs. So I urge you, open up the drug talk. If you're a young person, open it up with your parents. If you're a parent, open it up with your kids. Go to www.safetyfirst and you'll find lots and lots of resources there. And good luck. Thank you.
Welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. I'm Buford Terrell with Clayton Jones, and tonight our guest, Terry McWilliams. Clayton, I think, had an announcement he wanted to make.
Yes, I needed to wish somebody a happy birthday. That's an important person around here. Her name is Cheryl. I've been told I can't give you her age, but I have to say she's a lot younger than me.
Even though they wouldn't let us bring that many candles into the studio.
No.
Okay.
Happy birthday, Cheryl.
Happy birthday from all of us. And while we're doing shout-outs, there's a new film, What If Cannabis Cured Cancer? And it's a film by Lynn Richmond. There's going to be a screening put on by Houston Normal that will take the place of the December meeting of Houston Normal on December the 16th at 7:30 p.m. at 315 Fairview in Houston, Texas.
Fairview.
That's what it says.
Okay.
And hello, you're on the air.
You've heard it's Dean.
Hello, how is the representative of the Al Jazeera Network tonight?
I'm fine. I'm not so sure what I think about that. Cutting down on local production time, if you ask me, but maybe it'll be a good thing. Who knows? But yeah, I saw you and Clay, and who's the gentleman with you?
Terry McWilliams.
Terry McWilliams. I met you at the Secret Policeman's Ball.
Oh, yes. Hello, sir.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I don't know. Clay said he was going to be talking about that deck of cards. Nice people take drugs.
Okay. Yeah, he was showing it to us during some of the
Here they are.
And you know, the point about it is that when you get right down to it, it's almost become a prerequisite for getting elected in these United States. You know, last 3 presidents, of course, have smoked and snorted in some cases.
Oh, but at least one of them claims that he didn't inhale.
Yeah.
Well,
He must lie.
yeah, I don't know. His friends would have noticed the waste of pot, I think, if he But you know, it's really coming down to ending the taboo, making it possible to just speak the truth about this matter. You know, while this show is going on, there's a CNBC show, Marijuana Incorporated, with some rather positive things in there, even some quotes from Mr. Schaefer, you know, who issued the report to Nixon.
Yes.
And, you know, talking about that we shouldn't no longer arrest anybody for use of this product. Of course, Nixon threw the report in the trash, but, you know, we're going on 40 years since that point in time.
Yeah.
And I guess the point is we have to stand up, and by that I mean the knowledgeable people, ones who know the truth about this, and because of this taboo, this damn prohibition, it is a belief system almost akin to a church, and it's just almost impossible to speak against it, no matter how much truth you may know about it.
You know, Dean, when you talk about the people speaking, let me throw 3 numbers out here. In 1937, when they passed the first anti-marijuana law, the head of the Bureau of Narcotics said less than 100,000 people had used marijuana. In 1960, the government estimated that around 1 million people in the country had ever tried marijuana. A year ago, the federal government estimated that 44% of the adults, or more than 100 million people, had used marijuana, and 15 million used it at least once a month. Now, do those 3 numbers tell us anything about the success of the war on drugs?
Well, that is a pretty futile endeavor, I think. It does. Hey, you know, you're pointing that out, 1937, 100,000 people having had smoked in America. And that was at a point in time when I believe it was Harry J. Anslinger stood beside the bridge on the Potomac River and said, "You want me to get rid of marijuana?" And there was marijuana growing for miles up and down the Potomac River, right there next to Washington, D.C. And no one was using it. No one cared about it. But it was the demonization and the forbidden fruit that has led many people to try it.
Yeah.
Man.
We shoot ourselves in the foot with a machine gun 24/7 here in America because I guess it feels right.
Well, I'm afraid that machine gun's aimed a little bit higher than the foot, Dean.
You know, I think that the government, with all their falsehoods that come out against all these drugs, people start realizing that a few of the lies are wrong about marijuana. It don't grow breasts on men.
And lower your sperm count.
Yeah, all this other stuff, and you'll have deformed mongoloid children if you're high when you get pregnant. People are learning that these lies are all lies, and they're starting to go to the more harder drugs, figuring they lied about this, they're going to be lying about that. I think that if our government became a little bit more truthful with us, I think they could be a little bit more successful in the harder drug range, not with marijuana.
Well, you know, on KPFT, I get
a lot of mail from prisoners and other folks, but occasionally they'll route a CD to me, produced by the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and it's got those, the on-air reports designed to get people to not use drugs, and I listened to them, and they had one on there that I actually used, and it dealt with inhalants, talking about the use of inhalants in the home and how and dangerous that is. And I considered that to be the one piece of good work I'd ever seen by the ONDCP.
Well, the funny thing is, though, Dean, that brings up another interesting point. Because while inhalants are one of the most dangerous drugs anyone can use, and particularly they're used by children, if you look at what inhalants are, things like gasoline, dry cleaning fluids, solvents,
aerosol,
they're absolutely the things that all of us use every day in our day-to-day life. And it's one place where you can't even try prohibition. So I think to some extent, our trying to cope with the risk of inhalants maybe points out some of the better ways to try dealing with some of the other drugs.
Right, the more logical, common sense approach than just trying to say something untrue, frighten people, and think that they'll believe it.
Now we got K2s just coming under prohibition. Tomball just outlawed it.
The federal government just put it on an emergency Schedule 1 classification, which is what they did with ecstasy back in 1985.
Following Dr. Ricarte's faulty report where he injected method.
Oh no, it was before Ricarte.
Before Ricarte.
Because the amazing thing was that we have the emergency Schedule 1 of ecstasy. Over 250 psychotherapists and psychiatrists filed protests and complaints against it. And after those were filed, the DEA admitted that they had no idea that it was even used medically at all. They had never even heard of it as a medicine.
Wow. That's, well, typical enough. I mean, they just know what they want to know.
Well,
the rest out.
The ironic thing is I could pretty easily get K2 off the market today.
Oh.
How so?
Well, K2 is selling in most places for around $30 a gram.
20.
K20.
Yeah, 20.
It's a substitute for marijuana.
Right.
Absolutely.
If we legalized marijuana, its price dropped to $1 an ounce, which would be about 3 cents a gram. How many people would buy the real thing, and how many would pay $20 a gram for K2?
But well, John Lomax of the Houston Press just did a major story. I K2'd it you.
Yeah, I read that.
And that was a pretty good piece. I actually smoked some on the air, recorded it anyway for my radio show. And it has some similarities to marijuana, I gotta admit it. But
it's all the psychotropic effects.
But it's not. Well,
it's not your grandmother's pot.
It's sure not worth it.
Yeah. John did an equivalent piece 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when sativa was making waves as the legal substitute. Or
Salvia. Salvia divinorum.
Yeah. And in both cases, I think the hype is way overblown because, as near as I can tell from the people that have tried them,
the taste isn't the same.
They're the kind of thing that you might try them once just to see, but I haven't heard of more than a small handful of people that have ever gone back for the second try.
Well, I did the one time on the air, and I haven't done it since. I'll tell you that. I mean, it's very harsh. It's like smoking old, stale
potpourri
weed. I don't know how to say it other than that.
You know, it's not the K2 in the mix that bothers me.
The JWH.
But it's a liquid, and they sprinkle it over, in effect, what amounts to the sachet your grandmother used to keep in her underwear drawer. And frankly, I don't know what's mixed up in all of those smelly weeds that are used to make sachet.
That's the truth. Again, the more we try to control drugs, the worse we make it, it seems to me.
Terry, didn't you tell me that who manufactured that originally?
Pfizer was doing experiments to try to mimic some of the cannabinoids of marijuana, and they developed JWH, which is one of the main ingredients in these.
There are about 4 different chemicals that are
but JWH is one of the main ones.
Yeah. And it was developed to be used in animal experimentation to act like THC on cannabinoid receptors.
But it only affects the CB1 receptors, which gives you the psychotropic effects, but it's 300 times more potent in that effect.
And it's never been safety tested in humans.
I think that's what they're
it's
doing
been
now.
used strictly on animal research.
I know a couple of people that smoke it a lot.
Really?
They're
on probation
they're on
and
paper, they're on
stuff,
probation, and they go in, they test every week, and they don't test dirty.
Now they're
do you have anything else for us tonight, Dean?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of guests I got lined up for this coming Sunday night on KPFT 90.1 FM at 6:30. We're going to have Kathy Stout. She's a professor at University of Texas, El Paso. We're going to talk about the situation in Mexico and her sister city of Ciudad Juarez. And then on 7 o'clock on the Century of Lies show, we'll have Matt Elrod. He's with Drug Sense. He's based up in Victoria, Canada. We're going to talk about what's going on with our northern neighbor.
Okay.
As always, we're trying to dig out the unvarnished truth about the drug war on Drug Truth Network. And again, that's Sunday night, 6:30 to 7:30, KPFT 90.1 FM. All our shows are stored at drugtruth.net. You guys keep up the good work. Appreciate the opportunity here.
Well, thank you, Dean. We always are happy to hear from you and encourage people to listen into your shows.
Call me tomorrow, Dean.
All right.
I want to take a few minutes to veer us off onto a different subject. But let's take a break first, and then when I come back, we'll go in a different direction.
Hi, I'm Nadia Swaby with the Marijuana Policy Project. Welcome to Marijuana 2-Minute Truths. We've received lots of emails from viewers who want to know about the long-term health effects of marijuana, particularly what, if any, damage smoking marijuana causes to your lungs. Your lungs bring essential oxygen into your body, so of course hurting your lungs is a terrible idea. Did you know, for instance, that nearly 500,000 Americans die every year from tobacco-related lung disorders? If you've been paying attention, you probably did. But do you know how many people have ever died from marijuana-related cancer? 0. No one. Marijuana has never been shown to cause cancer in humans, and the largest, most definitive epidemiological studies have failed to find an association between marijuana use and lung cancer, or any other kind of cancer typically linked with smoking cigarettes. In 2006, Dr. Donald Tashkin of UCLA published what is perhaps the most famous of the marijuana lung cancer studies. The study of 2,200 people in Los Angeles found that even heavy marijuana smokers were no more likely to develop lung cancer than non-users, in contrast with tobacco users whose risk increases the more they smoke. Interestingly, this study was funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Dr. Tashkin was later quoted in the Washington Post. We hypothesized that there would be a positive association between marijuana use and lung cancer, and that the association would be more positive with heavier use. What we found instead was no association at all, and even a suggestion of some protective effect. In fact, some scientific studies have shown a trend toward lower lung cancer rates among marijuana smokers than non-smokers, suggesting that marijuana's active components, cannabinoids, have anti-tumor properties. Take a look at these findings. Cannabinoids are selective anti-tumor compounds as they can kill tumor cells without affecting their non-transformed counterparts. A strong and statistically significant anti-tumor effect was observed, in particular for a highly malignant human breast carcinoma cell line. Cannabidiol and cannabidiol-rich extract counteract tumor cell growth. This should not be taken to mean marijuana is good for you. No one is saying that. But how can marijuana be illegal when it has never been proven to have killed a single person through overdose or illness in 5,000 years of recorded history, while in the next hour, approximately 50 Americans will die from a tobacco-related illness? This has been your 2-Minute Truth. Marijuana has not been shown to cause lung cancer, but cannabinoids may help fight cancer. I'm Nadia Swaby with the Marijuana Policy Project. Don't forget to email us your questions. Send them to socialnetwork@mpp.org with the subject line Ask Nadia. Goodbye.
My generation, I
We're
feel, though, is
back.
pretty radical.
Welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. I want to use my executive privilege here and concentrate for a few minutes on the middle part of our name and look at the crime part. We have been having an extremely important hearing here in Houston over the last week or two. It unfortunately has been at least temporarily stopped by the Court of Criminal Appeals. But a very courageous local district judge has allowed defense lawyers to present evidence that the capital punishment system in the state of Texas is so poorly administered and has so many procedural faults that it cannot be constitutionally applied, that it becomes really just a matter of luck and crapshoot about whether anyone is sentenced to death. As I say, the hearings have been suspended. My own suspicion is, knowing our Court of Criminal Appeals, that that's probably all we're going to hear from it from some time. But the issue is important, and not just for capital punishment. The lawyers presenting the evidence were concentrating on 3 things: eyewitness identification, informer testimony, and faulty science. Eyewitness identification has been suspect for half a century now. All kinds of well-designed, well-structured scientific studies have been run showing that eyewitnesses are highly fallible. One of the more interesting one involving college students was a professor that had class after class after class look at a videotape of people playing basketball and instructing them to count the number of shots on baskets taken. Then after it was over, he asked them some questions about what they had seen. Virtually no one in any of his classes had ever even noticed that a man in a gorilla suit had strolled across the middle of the basketball court halfway through. About 10 or 15 years ago, the American Bar Association, based once again on solid scientific studies, made strong recommendations about the way to conduct both photographic and in-person lineups to avoid improper eyewitness identification. The state of Texas, and unfortunately most states, have refused to adopt these rather simple, totally inexpensive measures. The result is right now, believe it or not, the numbers and the statistics indicate that if an eyewitness in a courtroom picks out someone as the criminal, the odds really are that he's the wrong one. They're wrong more often than they're right. Yet most people, most jurors think it's the strongest possible evidence there is. The second element is that of informer testimony. There are three kinds of informers. The first is where the police catch someone committing a crime, then offer them the alternative of testifying against other people they know in return for no charges or a reduced sentence. The second, and probably the worst of all, are the paid informers, those who make money for going out and finding supposed criminals to tell the police about and then testify about it. There have been several documented cases where people have made well over $100,000 a year for several years as confidential informants for the FBI or the DEA. The third class of confidential informants are people who are in jail who claim to have overheard or talked to someone accused of a crime and heard that this person admit having done it. They give their snitch testimony, usually in return for a reduced sentence. Now, somewhere, someplace, somewhere on the face of the earth, under some circumstances, there may have been an informant in a criminal trial that told the truth. I have not seen him. I have not heard a reliable report about him. I have never seen a case in which one of those existed, but I will admit that it's physically possible that somewhere, once upon a time, some informant possibly told the truth, although it was probably by accident. The third thing that they're looking at is junk science. Some of you might have been following the paper about the man that was executed for having killed his family in an arson. The state scientific evidence board has been listening to him. All of the arson experts across the country have said that the stuff the fire marshal and the police inspectors in the case testified to, nothing could happen that way. We've had hundreds of people convicted of crimes because someone said their hair was similar to that found at the scene, yet other than through DNA, there's no way to identify hairs. It just can't be done. So whether it happens in Houston, it's time for us to clean the criminal evidence system up. And I've been rattling on, and we're running out of time. So I'd like to thank Terry for joining us tonight.
Peace, love, and
we'll
goodwill.
see you again in 2 weeks, and let's keep up the good fight until then. Thank you and good night.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatory review.
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. Damn prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize all drugs.
If we really want to improve our